Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and another episode on our Atomiswave to Dreamcast game series. We have a really special episode for you guys today because this is something I didn't think was actually going to happen. You'll know on the channel a few months ago I talked about Kenju, an unreleased Atomiswave game that I got in my inbox from a Japanese collector in October of last year. The email just said, I think you might want these, and inside of it was Kenju and Force 5 betas. Now I have nothing to do with this release, this is MegaVolt 85 that got it running on the Dreamcast, but getting those in October I made some videos on them and sent the files off to a few other collectors. And I never thought that one, these games would actually leak to the public, and two, within 3 months, you'd be able to play Kenju on your Dreamcast. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. This is running on an optical disc emulator on my Dreamcast, and it also works perfectly fine on any Dreamcast emulator as well. But the fact that this game went from unreleased arcade ROM to released arcade ROM to something that you could play in your living room on your Dreamcast is just absolutely incredible, because this game isn't unfinished. It's 100% done as far as I can tell. There's nothing about it that seems like it's in a beta stage, so this is like getting a brand new game for Dreamcast in 2021, one that no one's ever played before, because even more so than the Atomiswave games that I use the word port, that have been ported over to Dreamcast, this is something that no one ever really got a chance to play, because all those Atomiswave games were in arcades back in the early and mid 2000s, so you had a chance to check them out. Kenju, it was only in a few private collectors' hands, then you could play it on an emulator, and now, granted, I'm not capturing this from my couch, you can play it on your couch with friends. And it is just an absolutely great story of how far this has come. MegaVolt 85 has done a ton of stuff for Dreamcast in 2020 and 2021, and like I said, this is just something I never expected to see. Playing Kenju on a Dreamcast. Now, as far as the game's concerned, if you didn't watch my previous video on it, it is an absolutely great arcade fighting game. The cel-shaded graphics look amazing. All the backgrounds are super well animated. Pretty much everything's made of polygons, not, those 2D background layers that they kind of use to keep the processing power down. It is absolutely surprising this game never actually got ported home, or at least released for arcades. And that's the thing, this was location tested, and for some reason or another, Dream Factory decided that they didn't want to actually release Kenju to the market. But it's at a stage where they clearly finished the game, and maybe manufacturing was too expensive, or maybe it just didn't test well. I can't understand why though, and I just love this game for all that it is. You'll see there just previously, there's an air mechanic, and you can see air drive okay. There's a 3-stage meter to that, and depending on how filled up it is, your air drive is going to be more powerful. And once you get to the third bar, you can send your opponent into the sky and then combo juggle them all the way down. So it has a lot going for it as far as the mechanics are concerned. It feels like a Tekken, but it occurs mostly on a 2D plane. You can move around in 3D space as you're fighting, but it really is a 3D polygonal fighter that plays like a 2D sprite-based game. And I love all the colorfulness in the stage. You have all these balloons in the background, you have castles, you're in a ring, kind of looks a little bit like fighting vipers, but it just has so much charm that I am shocked this game didn't get released for arcades, and it is just perfect that we can play it on Dreamcast. And once the pandemic is over, I can't wait to have friends over and play this as a 2-player game, because that works perfectly fine. You'll see on the bottom it's set to free play, and the difficulty is arcade standard, which is to say, depending on how good you get with a character, sometimes it's really easy, sometimes it's not. And it does seem like it's set to a different difficulty than the NAOMI netboot ROM that I was using when the beta was sent to me, because I was able to get to the very end of that game with no issues whatsoever on my first playthrough. This one is giving me a little bit more resistance, so I think that difficulty has been adjusted. But now what we're going to do is switch characters so I can talk a little bit more about the game itself, because we've definitely touched on how cool it is to be able to play this. But there's a ton of different characters, from small, fast-paced fighters to obviously your larger, beefier, higher impact fighters that are just slower to move around. So it has that same sort of Street Fighter vibe to it, where depending on the size of the character and their strength, you're going to have to decide, what works for you, how you want to play the game, and what characters you really gel with. And I would say in this game at least, I enjoy the heavier fighters better, those big impact strikes. Yes, they're slower, but it just kind of clicks with me. And you'll see there with that air juggle, which is able to knock out my opponent, no big deal whatsoever. So it's a game that I really want to play a lot more of and get better at the characters. And it's a game I hope that the fighting game community picks up more and wants to play more, because it would be really interesting to see people competitively get into this game just for the fun aspect of it, because it's really rare that an unreleased fighting game comes out, even rare that it's then, like I said, using the word ported again, I know it's not right, brought over to the Dreamcast so that you can play it sitting around on the couch with your friends. And it's just a great thing to have occurred. And now moving on again, not all the stages are as, dramatically artistic as others. We're playing in a city here, we're on a highway, and the art style definitely matches what would be going on. But I do like some of the other stages, although that 747 flying above, there's enough stuff going on in the background that it feels like it's a lively place to be. Not as much so as SNK or Capcom with their backgrounds that are just lushly animated and there's something to look at the entire time, but they do a really good job making this feel like something that you really want to interact with. And now we're on a train going through a canyon as the fight goes on. Kind of reminds me of Geru Mark of the Wolves with the 2D train level in that. But like I said, between just the overall fighting mechanics, that air drive mechanic, the cel-shaded art style, everything about this just begs you to want to play it. And if you have a Dreamcast with an optical disc emulator, or if you want to emulate this on DMule or any of the other Dreamcast emulators, by all means, give it a shot, because it's going to cost you nothing and you're going to have a ton of fun with it. What I'm going to do now is let you watch the next match, because the soundtrack is also exceptional in this game, and I'll be back in like 45 seconds to a minute to close out this follow-up video to Kenju. But enjoy!
Round one, fight! Beast Driver! Beast Driver!
And I totally walked into the same special move twice in a row, but that is my fault. But moving on to a different character, I do like the entire roster. Maybe some of the art design is a little bit 2000s-y, but I love the fact that at least in the different modes, if you just play arcade mode, you can select your next bout. Now there is an arcade mode and there is a story mode, and I'm not sure what the real difference is outside of selecting the character, because you get the same intros in each stage, whether you're playing story mode or whether you're playing arcade mode. So maybe that's not finished, but it really is hard to say. I mean, granted, fighting games, the stories aren't hugely impactful, and most fighting games released now barely even have a story mode compared to the 90s and early 2000s. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on there, but it really doesn't matter, because I'm sure whatever story might be missing, if there is any, probably isn't that impactful. But I do love that moving on to the France stage here, there's so much depth in the background. You have the palace in the back, and behind that you have a slightly blurred out Eiffel Tower, and you have a couple doves, pigeons, I'm going to go with pigeons, kind of just pecking around in the background. And it just can show you how much love was put into Kenju, and how shocking it is that this wasn't released to arcades at the minimum, because this game, as far as I can tell, is 100% done. All the characters have full movesets, there's a full story involved in the game, there's a full character roster, so really, this should be considered an unreleased game that's now available to play on Dreamcast. Kenju finally came out and everyone can enjoy and play it. And that is the great thing about the retro gaming community, and why it's so much fun to make these videos and do the things I do on other platforms, is that if it wasn't for a passionate community, these things never would actually happen. And I do love ending the match in that air juggle. It just feels like you're doing that much better of a job playing the game. But that's why these things should be celebrated, because if it wasn't for people like MegaVolt 85, if it wasn't for the collector in Japan sending me these ROMs back in October, maybe you wouldn't be playing this game. And I'm not taking credit for it. I sent the file to a few other people. I don't know what happened from there. So this isn't my project. I didn't do it, but I'm so glad that it does exist. But if you have a Dreamcast and an optical disc emulator, you should probably download and put it on the SD card and play it today, because it is that great. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I love chatting with you guys, and if you need help getting the game to run, I'm happy to. Short of that, we will be back on Friday and Sunday and Tuesday with more videos in our series, because we seem to be adding more videos per week. Short of that, I hope you enjoyed Kenju, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.